My name is Marc Howard, and the seed for my story and for what I call my second career and now consider to be my life's work and mission was planted on the first day of my senior year of high school. And it centers on what happened to my childhood friend, Marty Tankleff. Marty and I were born 9 days apart. We first met at the age of 3 at a place called Lovey-Dovey Preschool. We grew up in the same town, went to the same schools in Port Jefferson, New York, on Long Island. On September 7th, 1988, having just turned 17 a week earlier, Marty woke up to find his parents brutally murdered in their own house. And by the end of that day, Marty was in handcuffs, having supposedly confessed to killing his parents. By the end of the next summer, Marty was convicted of double murder and sentenced to 50 years to life in a maximum security prison. There was a big problem. Marty was actually innocent. My journey with Marty is worthy of its own book, documentary, scripted series, podcast, and full disclosure, all of those are in the works, so stay tuned and look out for them. As young adults, our lives went in completely different directions. And Marty likes to use this line, Mark went to Yale, I went to jail. But we reconnected about a decade into his prison sentence and became very close. And one day in the prison visiting room, I made him a promise that changed my life forever. I promised Marty that I would do everything I could to help get him out of prison. And that included going to law school, even though at that point I was already a professor myself. Ultimately, I contributed to Marty's exoneration, and he was released after serving almost 18 years in prison. And these days, Marty and I work together as co-professors at Georgetown, and our students have helped 4 other wrongfully convicted people get out of prison, with more to come. So there's obviously a lot more to that story, but that's actually not what I'm here to talk about today. Because my experience with Marty opened a window onto something much bigger than wrongful convictions, and much deeper than the simple but often false dichotomy between innocence and guilt. I remember back when I used to visit Marty in prison, I would look around the visiting room and I would see dozens of people sharing tender moments with their incarcerated loved ones. And I came to realize that each and every person wearing a prison uniform had the same humanity that I saw in Marty. And despite the fact that they were living in the worst conditions imaginable, and despite the fact that they had been rejected by a society that viewed and treated them as evil and hopelessly flawed, they were all human beings who had family and friends who still loved them. After Marty was exonerated, I started volunteer teaching in a maximum security prison, and I've been going inside regularly ever since. In fact, whenever I travel, I try to stop somewhere and visit a prison in the area. I've now spent over 800 days, but admittedly no nights, in American prisons and jails. Our country has 2 million people locked in cages, human beings locked in cages right now. We have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners. Yet within that wasteland of human pain and suffering, I've been blessed to encounter the tremendous humanity that has been abandoned by our society. And I'm now pursuing my own distinctive path to challenge and hopefully one day contribute to ending mass incarceration. And I view this work as a calling because some force within me is bringing this out and is making me care for incarcerated people and desire to get the outside world to recognize their humanity. And every time I walk out of a prison, I challenge myself, how can I get the outside world to care about people in prison? I've now brought in over 1,000 students to prison. I brought in hundreds of guest speakers and observers, and they all call the experience inspiring and eye-opening. A few years ago, when I was bringing a Georgetown class to prison, one of my students said something very insightful. She said, "If all of America could be with us in here right now, we would no longer have mass incarceration." And those words stayed with me, and I thought about them. And they challenged me, and they ultimately inspired me to create the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice. The Douglass Project is a national organization that brings members of free society into prisons to meet incarcerated people and to connect on a deeply human level. We're trying to break a 4-decade destructive pattern of demonization of human beings and turn it into a constructive one built on humanization. We're a relatively new organization. We just launched in January 2020, and obviously the COVID challenge made prisons the last place anyone would want to go inside. But now our visitation program is thriving in Colorado, where we have regular virtual and in-person visits at a men's prison, in Florida, where we have in-person visits at a men's prison and a women's prison, and in Washington, D.C., where we have regular visits at a men's and women's unit at the D.C. jail. And we'll soon be opening up programs in New York and Louisiana, and we're in conversations with many other states. And our goal is that in 3 to 5 years, we'll be operating in over 25 states. Now, I want to be clear that what we're doing is not some kind of prison tourism or trip to the zoo. On the contrary, during Douglass Project visits, about 10 to 15 outside guests get the opportunity to walk into a prison, to see where residents live, and then to sit down with them and share an experience meant to form strong human connections. So we start in a full group, everyone's sitting in a big circle, and we have introductions, and we provide some questions and conversation starters, such as, who is important in your life? Or what's the best piece of advice you ever received? Or how do you define family? And what we realize right off the bat, as people start talking, is that everyone's answers are very similar. And suddenly, everyone comes to this realization that there's so much more that unites us than divides us. Then we move into small groups of about 6 to 8 participants. It's always a mix of inside and outside participants. And that's where the magic really happens. We provide another set of powerful questions, and they go very deep in their conversations. And frankly, no one wants to stop the small group discussions. But after an hour, we shift back to a full circle with closing reflections. And every single time, without fail, all of the participants talk about the commonalities that they discovered, the inspiration that they share, and the connections that they've made that will last with them. The inside participants tell us that this program is the highlight of each week for them, and that it's given them this newfound optimism and confidence as they prepare to re-enter society one day. As for the outside guests, and there have been many hundreds so far, the most common phrase we hear is that it's life-changing. And they tell us that now when they think of incarcerated people, they think of friends and family like the people they just spent time with, as opposed to others, much less monsters, as they're sometimes made out to be in our society. And perhaps surprisingly, correctional officials love this program. And wardens tell us that it makes their facilities safer because the inside participants are engaged in positive activities and thinking, and they're actually motivated other people around them to do the same. In fact, in the prison in Colorado, where we've been operating for over a year now, we have a wait list of over 500 men who want to join our program. Now, going forward, we're working very hard to continue to scale and expand our operations. We want to be bringing in tens of thousands of people a year into American prisons and jails. And we want all kinds of people, from students to retirees, to members of book clubs, to members of faith communities. We're also working with businesses and developing corporate sponsorships and working with universities, as well as nonprofit organizations. Overall, and one other thing is that we're working with targeted groups, with special groups of prosecutors and judges, because it's so important for them to go inside and see where they're sending people, and also how people can change over time. So overall, our goal is to change culture by exposing the public to the humanity of incarcerated people. And so that those members, those outside visitors, will walk out and they will create and support policies that provide genuine second chances to people when they come home. And 95% of people in prison will come home. That's a fact. So just as my life was once changed in a prison visiting room when I made that promise to Marty, I'm now trying, through the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice, to give that same type of inspiration, meaning, and motivation to people all across the country. Because together, with open eyes and hearts, we can break down the inhumanity and injustice of incarceration in America. Thank you.